Hello, everybody. How are you? I hope you're having the best time. Today, with my friends Alejandro and Johan, we will present to you an interesting documentary about several photographers recognized around the world for their excellent photographs, worthy of being remembered. So, my name is Diego, and let's take a look.
Hello everyone, how are you? I hope you're very well. Today I'm going to be talking about a photographer with a really interesting story, but unfortunately very short. I'm going to tell you about Kevin Carter. He was born on September 13, 1969 in Johannesburg, South Africa. He was a photojournalist, and his career as a photographer began at the age of 23 when towns near his hometown were at war. In March 1993, Kevin Carter traveled to Sudan and was on the border to photograph the famous triangle where the Islamic government was waging war with the Nur and Dinka tribes. The plane he was traveling inland for half an hour in the village of Ayot, a community in Fangat State. There, Kevin started taking pictures and walked into the bushes. He heard a whimper and saw a boy on the ground near a feeder. As he bent down to photograph him, a vulture landed near him. The image was shocking. Careful not to disturb the bird, he waited about 20 minutes and positioned himself to get the best angle. After taking the pictures, Carter chased the animal away, sat down under a tree, and Carter used drugs and smoked a lot. So he moved away from the people, lit a cigarette, talked to God, and he cried. He cried a lot. He was very shocked with everything that was happening with the people, with the children. He became very sad. Days later, the New York Times published the image, and thousands of people called the newspaper to ask what had happened to the baby. The image was really shocking for everybody. The photo became a symbol of Africa's suffering and was acclaimed, but at the same time, public opinion turned against Kevin for not helping the child. Despite gaining worldwide recognition, Kevin did not know what to do because of the stress of his work and personal life. The photo was world famous, but no one knew about the little boy's life. Everyone thought that the child had died in the clutches of the vulture. But what Kevin said was that the boy recovered and continued his journey on foot once the vulture was chased away from the area. Years later, journalists went to talk to the boy's family and were able to talk to his father. The boy's father said that the boy was not alone at that moment and that the boy had not died that day. The boy died at the age of 14 from a fever. The journalist also learned that when Kevin took the photo, the little boy was only 2 years old, and the boy's father told the newspaper that the child was not in a danger at the time. The image was decisive in Kevin Carter's life. His exhausting work life also led him to extremes of euphoria and depression that he mixed with heavy drug use to cope with his profession. The unexpected came on April 12th in 1994 when the New York Times called him to tell him that he had won the Pulitzer for his photo in Sudan. But things were not going well for Kevin. 6 days after the news, his best friend, the also renowned photographer Ken Oxterbrook, was killed in a shooting, and Carter was devastated. During those months, he also had to deal with criticism, and some journalists claimed that his award had been a fluke, alleging that he had created the photo to achieve the image of closeness with the vulture. Others questioned his ethics. Everywhere he went, he was asked the same question. So, did you help the girl? The mother became an aggravating factor. It was the most important photo of his career, but Kevin wasn't proud of it. He didn't like it to see it, and he hated it. There was so much pressure on Kevin that he regretted not to having helped the girl. Carter sank into a deep depression. He couldn't work, he made absurd mistakes, and he was late for interviews. On July 27, 1994, he backed his red Nissan pickup truck into a blue rubber tree in a river where he had played as a child. He got into the vehicle and started the engine. Then he played music on his Walkman, lay on his side and used a backpack as a pillow. And in a farewell note, he wrote that he was depressed, no phone, no money for rent or child support for his daughter. Also revealed that he was haunted by vivid memories of murders and corpses, and anger and pain of children that starving or wounded, and that he would join with Ken if he was lucky. Ken was his friend, and Kevin died at the age of 33, and the saddest thing is that he never knew about the gratitude of the little boy's family for portraying his history. The family was very grateful to him for showing the world their reality.
And now, after listening to Aleja, we're going to listen to my friend Johan.
Hello everyone, my name is Johan Torres, and today I'm going to talk to you about two fantastic photographers in the history. The first one was known as Robert Capa, but his real name was Andrzej Friedman. He was born in Budapest in 1913. He was an Hungarian photographer and a war correspondent, exiled from Hungary in 1931 due to his association with left-wing groups. He studied journalism in Germany and worked for the Depot Agency. In 1936, together with his partner Gerda Taro, he invented the figure of Robert Capa, a fascinating American journalist, and under this pseudonym he presented the first exhibition of his works, which fetched exorbitant praises. Although fiction was not long in being discovered, he decided to keep that name. International prestige came mainly from his reports on the Spanish Civil War and on World War II for Life magazine, when he captured war episodes such as the Japanese bombings on China, the North African campaigns, and the Normandy's landing. In 1947, with Henry Cartier-Bresson, Roger Vandiver, and David Seymour, he founded Magnum Photos, the first cooperative agency of independent photographers. A year later, he traveled to the Middle East to photograph the fighting in Palestine. After the creation of Magnum, he dedicated himself to teaching younger photographers, until in 1954 he decided to cover the Indochina War, which was a fighting for independence from France. This same year, he was devastated by the explosion of a mine that he inadvertently stepped on. Looking at this photograph, taken in the Day D, or the D-Day, we can imagine what it would be like to have been in the presence of the arrival of the Allies in a Europe dominated by Nazi Germany. But we do not get to feel enough fevers until we see what this photographer explains to us about the arrival to the coast. He said, "My beautiful France seemed seedy and unappealing. A German machine gun spitting bullets around the barge completely ruined my return. The men from my barge got into the water. White side, rifles ready to fire, invasion obstacles, and the smoky beach in the background, a great time to take photos." I paused for a moment on the catwalk to take my first real picture of the invasion. The boatswain, who was in an understandable rush to get out of there, mistook my photo-taking attitude for explainable hesitation, and he helped me make up my mind with a well-aimed quick kick to the rear. The water was cold, and the beach was still more than 100 yards away. Bullets pierced the water around me, and I headed for the nearest steel obstacle. A soldier arrived at the same time as me, and for a few minutes we shared shelter. He removed the pistol from his raincoat and began firing aimlessly toward the smoky beach. The sound of his rifle gave her enough courage to keep going, and he left me alone at the obstacle. I also felt safe enough to take pictures of the other guys who were hiding just like me. This is the way he tells us how that landing was, which transports us to that moment and makes us feel as if it were oneself who took the photograph. It is simply amazing and somewhat terrifying to imagine. He also said that it was still too early and the day was too gray to take good photos, but the gray water and the overcast sky made the imagine of the little men, dodging bullets sheltered in the anti-invasion framework designed by Hitler. Quite photogenic. I finished taking some photos and the sea had seeped through my pants. Reluctantly, I tried to move away from the steel obstacle that protected me, but the enemy bullets would not allow me. 50 meters in front of me, one of our half-burnt amphibian tanks came out the water and offered me a new safe place to protect myself. I evaluated the situation. I reached the tank among floating bodies, took a few more photos, and gathered enough guts to head to the beach. The Germans opened fire at will, and I could not find any gap between the shells to travel the last 20 meters that separated me from the beach. I stayed behind my tank repeating a little phrase from my days in the Spanish Civil War. It's something very serious. It's something very serious. This is a very serious matter. And that's how Robert Capa tells us the story about that photo and the place, well, how it was having some bullets flying around him. The second one is named William Eggleston. He was born in Memphis, Tennessee in 1939. He's a very recognized photographer by establishing a new pictorial style that deftly combines vernacular subject matter with an innate and sophisticated understanding of color, form, and composition. His photographs transform the ordinary into distinctive, poetic images that eschew fixed meaning. His 1976 solo exhibition at the Museum of Modern Art, New York, created by John Sarkowski, marked one of the first presentations of color photography at the museum. Although initially criticized for its unfamiliar approach, the show and its accompanying catalog, William Eggleston's Guide, heralded an important moment in the medium's acceptance with the art historical canon, and it solidified the artist's position as one of the foremost practitioners of this date. Eggleston's work continues to exert an influence on contemporary visual culture at large. One of the most famous pictures of this photographer was named Greenwood, Mississippi, but also was known as the Red Ceiling. This picture is inarguably the most iconic and sought-after images from William Eggleston, decades-long chronicle of his native South. Awash in the supersaturated reds, Greenwood, Mississippi exemplifies Eggleston's groundbreaking work with the dye transfer color process. It has been illustrated extensively in literature related not only to William Eggleston but also the history of color photography. Further, references to these images have been used repeatedly in other media, such as music and film. The image has thus become now colloquially as the Red Ceiling. He said also that the Red Ceiling was like back exercise for him, because he knew that red was the most difficult color to work with. A little red is usually enough, but to work with an entire red surface was a challenge. It was hard to do. He doesn't know of any totally red pictures, except in advertising. The photograph is still powerful. It shocks you every time.
Well, and now I'm going to talk to you about two very important photographers. Diane Arbus was an American photographer. Arbus' imagery helped to normalize marginalized groups and highlight the importance of proper representation of all people. She photographed a wide range of subjects, including strippers, carnival performers, nudists, people with dwarfism, children, mothers, couples, elderly people, and middle-class families. She photographed her subjects in familiar settings, their homes, on the street, in the workplace, in the park. She is noted for expanding notions of acceptable subject matter and violates canons of the appropriate distance between photographer and subject. By befriending, not objectifying her subjects, she was able to capture in her work a rare psychological intensity. She was born into a wealthy New York Jewish family under the name of Diane Nemerov. Her father, David Nemerov, was a Polish Jew who had built a thriving fashion business, thus facilitating Diane's first direct and close contact with the field. Her older brother, Howard Nemerov, became a poet laureate. At age of 14, Diane began her relationship with Alan Arbus, whom she married when she was 18, adopting her last name and learning photography from him. They had two daughters, Dune in 1945 and Amy in 1954. In the 40s, the couple dedicated themselves to fashion photography in magazines such as Esquire, Vogue, and Harper's Bazaar. In 1945, they found the Diane and Alan Arbus Photographic Studio. Being a woman at the time, it was unusual for her to appear in the name of the studio. Later, when she began to publish her own works, she was quickly recognized, receiving two grants from the Guggenheim Foundation for her work American Race, Manners and Customs, so that she could continue developing her career as an artist and photographer. Influenced by model and by Tom Browning's films Freaks, Diane Arbus abandoned the elegant models of fashion magazines and chose marginal, different, and eccentric people to be portrayed: twins, mentally ill, giants, dysfunctional families, circus freaks, prostitutes, travestis, etc. People looked directly at the camera, getting the flash to clearly reveal their most characteristic features. Arbus managed to prevent the viewer from identifying with those portrayed, since she managed to provoke fear, shame, and discomfort. Now I'm going to talk about Margaret Bourke White. She was born in 1904 in the Bronx district of New York with the name of Margaret White. She, however, will be remembered by the surname of her mother, with whom she began working, Margaret Bourke White. According to the chronicles of her orderly and meticulous character came from her father, an engineer. From a young age, she stood out for her intelligence and went through 6 universities. In 1927, she received a degree in biology with a specialty in herpetology. That means the study of reptiles. She also studied photography at Columbia University to improve on a hobby that she inherited from her father. He, unfortunately, died soon and she was forced to work before finishing her training. He never imagined that thanks to her little passion, she, her daughter, would end up meeting Gandhi and endure the horror of photographing the barbarism of the Nazi concentration camps. Her passion for progress and technology led her to work with emerging architects and engineers to photograph new buildings and all kinds of industrial advance. She was even one of the pioneers when it came to working with flashes. Precisely, this ability was what led her to be considered one of the best techniques of those years in which everything was going to fall. Her hardest work was, without a doubt, the first images of the Nazi concentration camps in 1945. A really sensitive experience, not only because of what she saw, but because for her paternal family was of Jewish origin. She was the first woman to receive permission to work as a war photographer on the USA force flags. But if you have to choose a photograph for which she will go down in history, is the image of Gandhi with the spinning wheel, reading the report that she made of him hours before he was assassinated. As we can read in the book The Photos of the Century, the session was complicated. They knew that her ideas were, so they practically forced her to learn how to spin and spinning before taking the photos. Photography is an art, without a doubt, an art that exhibits and teaches the tiny but important things in life, detail by detail. I hope you like photography as much as we do. So, thank you so much for watching.